Okay, Jordan, we're rolling on eScribe and you're ready to go when you are.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, good morning. It's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and call the Land Use and Planning Committee to order. Instructions to join our meeting appear on the screen. You can visit ci.missoula.mt.us/webcasts, and there you'll find a link to the meeting agenda and related documents, as well as information to join the meeting, the live meeting via Zoom. And then if you're in the live meeting, you can raise your hand if you'd like to provide public comment using the hand raise function in Zoom. Our first item is roll call. Amanda, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Anderson? Absent. Becerra? Absent. Carlino?
Present.
Contos?
Here.
Hess?
Present.
Jones?
Present.
Jordan?
Present.
Nugent? Absent. Savage? Absent. Cheryl?
Present.
Basika?
Sorry, present.
Thank you. And West? Absent. Let's see.
And
I have 7 members present. I'm not sure if you have a quorum quite yet.
Okay, we do with 7. It looks like Jennifer Savage has joined us as well.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, and Mayor Engen has joined us too. Welcome, Mayor. So our first, or apologies, we need to next approve the minutes. So we have minutes from April 20th, 2022. Are there changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will be approved. Is there any public comment on items not listed on our agenda? And I'll just note for the record that we have no members of the public in attendance, so we can move on. Our first item, our only item for this installment 1 of LUP today is a contract to bring on the consultant that has been selected for the comprehensive code reform effort. And I'm really pleased that Mayor Engen is here to introduce this item. The mayor has put together a vision over the years on how to reform our land use code. And Mayor, I'll turn it over to you to give a brief introduction, and then we have Ben Brewer and members of CPDI staff to present the item. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, folks. Pleasure to see you this morning, all the way from my office here today, which is pretty exciting for me. Pardon me. This is not my first code reform rodeo, as they say. We embarked in the latter part of the first decade of this century in creating Title 20, which is the zoning code under which you all operate today. And you've got varying degrees of experience with it. And some of that experience is good and some of it's frustrating. And I think the same can be said for staff. I think the same can be said for residents. And I think the same can be said for folks who build houses and the buildings where we engage in commercial enterprise around our community. And Title 20 was a good step, but it was a short step. And now we're going for a longer step. And again, I think you all have heard me talk about housing, and you've certainly heard your constituents talk about housing as the critical issue facing Missoulians today. And we have a three-pronged approach to solving for that. None of it happens quickly, unfortunately. None of it is magical, unfortunately. But by being intentional and systematic, I believe we can get to a place where doing business in the city of Missoula, particularly the business of developing housing for residents, is as simple as anywhere in the state, but also promotes the kind of quality that residents and you and I and staff expect and really demand. Two of the pieces of that puzzle: one, investment. And we've talked about this pretty relentlessly. We are doing land banking, and in those cases where the city is able to acquire land that other folks, for a variety of reasons, may not be interested in trying to develop, we create opportunity. And we create opportunity by leveraging all of our resources to bring to bear. And Scott Street is a great example of that. That's 19 acres that has been fallow forever, a challenging site by virtue of industrial pollution and contamination over the years. But through our concerted efforts, even with Title 20, we're in a position now where we hope to be breaking ground in the not too distant future on what we think is the largest affordable housing project in the state. That investment is only a piece of the puzzle. However, we also need to invest in staff and have a hard look at our organization and the way we're organized and the way we're staffed and the way our processes work. That process reform, that organizational reform is ongoing, and we've been really flexible over time in doing our best to accommodate needs as they arise, really being nimble. When building industry was telling us that they had a backlog of residential housing permits, building permits, we shifted gears. We applied resources to getting those permits out the door, and we were highly successful at that. But some other things went by the wayside. We remain in that position largely today. So we continue to talk about ways to staff appropriately, to retain the talented staff that we have, and to recruit for what are difficult jobs. I think in any environment, but particularly in this sort of hectic and crisis-minded environment, it's tough to recruit and retain folks. So we're working on that front. And then finally, what you're hearing today is code reform. This is looking at Title 20 and some of our other titles that have to do with land use and development, and really separating wheat from chaff is a piece of this. Over the years, we cobbled together code based on circumstances, reality on the ground, experience. In doing so, our regulations become complicated. And that complication leads to miscommunication. It leads to us moving more slowly than we'd like. It leads to frustration among neighbors who have expectations around predictability, and certainly creates problems for folks who build houses who also rely on that predictability. So what we're bringing you today is a contract with an organization selected to help us cross that divide and get us to the next level of code, the next level of quality. I believe that that mutual exclusivity is not necessarily a thing always. Once in a while it is, but in this case, quality, affordability, neighborhood and community values are not mutually exclusive to getting houses built faster, getting houses built with less complication, getting houses built with more predictability. So that's what code reform is all about. We'll steal ideas from communities who are doing it very well. We'll tailor this to challenges that may be unique to Missoula. And at the end of this process, we believe that we'll have the best working document to guide staff, to guide development community, and to guide the broader community and all of you moving forward so that we can meet the critical housing need that we face on a daily basis, that we hear about on a daily basis, and that the folks we serve are experiencing on a daily basis. So thank you for letting me take the time this morning to talk through that a little bit. And I look forward to hearing the presentation this morning and hope I can get your support.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that, and look forward to implementing this vision. We have Ben Brewer from CPDI to introduce the code reform contract. Ben?
Great. Well, thank you very much. This has been Ben Brewer with CPDI, and I'll be talking through our request for this contract. And just to let you know, we have about probably 15 or 20 minutes of presentation here to talk through that, and then we'll have time afterwards for discussion and questions and whatnot. So let me share my screen. All right, can everyone see that all right?
Yes, thanks.
Great. So today I'm going to just talk through the background and project goals a little bit more for the code reform project. Give a recap of the consultant selection process, and then just an overview of the project components to bring up the familiarity there again. And we're going to talk to how community engagement will be incorporated into this project as well, and then get to the motion and any discussion and questions. So just to build on the remarks by the mayor, I'd like to give an overview again of what has led to the point of pursuing this code reform project. This project is generally based on a need. The way I'd like to frame it here is to reconcile two fundamental challenges that we're experiencing in Missoula. And the first is that we are challenged to deliver on CPDI's mission, which is to promote equitable, sustainable, and quality growth and development. And again, to recap the mayor's comments, one of those big issues is there have been growing community concerns and frustrations about development in the Missoula community. Community members are concerned with the inequitable impacts of development. Developers are frustrated with the lack of regulatory clarity and the length of review times, and city staff and officials struggle with the lack of alignment between the regulations and our policies on a project-by-project basis. Housing is still unavailable to many in our community, as we know. The development approval processes have continually become more complex, and updating our codes to streamline those processes can help reduce the cost of new housing. While doing so, a comprehensive community approach is needed to identify an equitable way of increasing our housing supply as well. And finally, there are concerns that the city's development codes may hinder the city's own goals and mission. Incremental updates to regulations over the years have been through a piecemeal approach, in some cases losing sight of some of the broader missions. New regulations have been added through a series of different codes and titles, manuals, administrative documents, and this has led to an increased instances of conflicting requirements and regulations. And it's become increasingly clear that a comprehensive review and modernization of the regulations is needed to achieve this CPDI mission. The second, kind of fundamental challenge that frame this as is that has led to this is that the city is not adequately implementing its policies. And to explain this, I'm going to walk through a timeline here of kind of the last 10 or 15 years. Starting in 2009, when the last zoning update was adopted, and this is when the city transitioned from Title 19, which had been the zoning code in effect since the 1970s, to our current Title 20 zoning code, which also included the current zoning map as well. Moving ahead, 6 years or so from there, in 2015, the city adopted a bold and comprehensive planning document in our Missoula city growth policy. Unfortunately, for various reasons, there was not a follow-up comprehensive rezoning effort to update Title 20 to reflect the various and many policy goals that were identified in the new growth policy. And rather, the already existing zoning was tweaked and modified incrementally on an annual basis through a process called zoning maintenance. And then over the next 6 years, the city adopted or updated many of what we think of as the bulk of current city policy. We updated the Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Plan. We adopted our housing policy in 2019, a place to call home. We adopted our first annexation policy. We updated the downtown master plan. In 2020, we created our strategic plan. We adopted the Swatup-Kane plan and form-based code for the area west of Reserve out near the airport. We went through the subdivision and TED recommendations report process. We adopted in 2021 the Justice, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion policy for the city. Again, the first, and then we updated the long-range transportation plan document as well. And that was a significant planning effort. And so all through this time, the city development codes were updated in an incremental fashion. And so while all this policy gives a clear declaration of our values and goals, it does not provide us the tools through regulation and code that we need to achieve the goals in these policies. And so comprehensive code reform aims to do just that. So at this point, we're at the point where we've selected the consultant team to lead this project and are requesting the council approve a contract to begin their service with the city. This timeline here is walks us through what's brought us to today's request since identifying the need for the project. We initially approached the city council at LUP for the need for comprehensive code reform in July of 2021. And then incorporated that request into the August presentations to BCAO and the final request for the CPDI budget for the FY22 at the end of August. So at that time, the funding request for the project was presented to be broken out evenly between FY22 and FY23. And once the budget was approved for the first installment of project funds, we proceeded with the request for proposal process. The RFP was posted in December of 2021 with the deadline for proposals on January 20th. We held applicant interviews in mid-February, reached a selection decision by early March. And since that time, we were engaged in refinement and negotiation of the scope and are now at the point where we've completed that process and are ready to request approval to enter into a contract with our selected consultant team. To give a brief recap of the selection process, in short, it was very robust. We had the good fortune of attracting several very high quality, nationally recognized consultant teams to apply. Several of whom indicated that the RFP and nature of the project had stood out for its thoroughness and dedication to taking on these complex issues. The RFP was advertised broadly, and 4 of the 5 proposals that we received were strong enough to warrant an interview. And the selection committee determined that the Meta Urban Design team was the preferred candidate based especially on their team composition and project approach as outlined in their proposal, but also some of the key deciding factors. And this really was a difficult decision, but some of the key factors were an emphasis and ability to set the stage through early engagement and messaging in order to bring the community along with eventual changes to code, an ability to communicate in a way that draws everyone to the table, focus on training staff and the users along the way rather than all at the end of the process, and a style of work product, including graphics, visuals, and scenario planning that cuts through the jargon that can be typical in these and makes the process more accessible and relatable to the community. The team composition is shown here. The primary consultants in the team are Meta Urban Design, along with Peter J. Park, City Planning and Design, and Cascadia Partners. And additional subcontract or consulting will be provided by Future West, Six Pony Hitch, and More Sky, Less Ceiling. So the attached scope of work with materials with the contract provide a complete description of the anticipated components of this project. But to summarize those here, there are several primary components of what code reform will involve that I just want to point out. The first of which, the endpoint for this is what's called a Unified Development Code, or a UDC. But within that larger goal, this is to try to kind of graphically break this out and how we see this running. But the main kind of project components include a UDC framework, which is a near-term deliverable to set that up midway through the project, conducting a community innovations audit process that will look to identify a strategy for development of the new code based on analysis of updated city policy that will be conducted early on in the process, as well as an equity and land use audit, a community forum analysis, and growth scenario modeling. And then updates to the city growth policy will be concurrent. And those will be based on our recent 5-year review of the growth policy, but also coordinated with the community audit effort. And then finally, the final piece of this is development of those innovative code tools that are updated, modernized, innovated, and then integrating those into the a single unified development code. So to summarize this project, the city seeks to further its implementation of the vision set forth in our Missoula City Growth Policy, the city strategic framework, and related city policy through the creation of a unified development code that achieves the aspirational elements of recent city policy. The final UDC will integrate all city development regulations, so including but not limited to zoning, subdivision, parks, and engineering regulations, into one code, and update the regulations to be responsive to Missoula's current and emergent land use needs, with a special emphasis on affordability, equity, and sustainability. As you'll notice in this slide, it indicates as well ongoing public engagement throughout the project, with identified cycles of engagement built into the timeline, and those again are identified more fully in the scope. But to talk more about engagement with this with the public on this project, I'm going to pass things over to the community engagement specialist for CPDI, Ashley Brittner-Wells.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you this morning. I think this is my first meeting as the community engagement specialist. I just wanted to touch on some of the information that Ben talked a little bit about, with the consultant selection specifically, and their just focus on, really robust community engagement was a big piece of the selection. And obviously my position is a big piece of it as well. Our department is really starting to develop more inclusive and accessible community engagement practices to ensure that all of our residents have ways to meaningfully engage with issues that matter to them. So really knowing when to access or have available community engagement practices and what will be done with the input they provide and how that will inform the project is a big piece of that. So this work will be led by me, obviously, but I do believe that community engagement is a large piece. But as we create and go through this process with code reform, really making sure that we're creating a new culture around it. So this to residents, following up and learning as we go, so that the solutions to these complex issues are informed by the community voice. Potentially being challenged as we navigate these processes and embark on this really hopefully iterative, community engagement framework.
Ashley, I'm
So
not sure if
in
it's
my
just
work,
me, but
yep.
your audio is breaking up a little bit. I'm not sure. Is that the case for others as well?
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Not sure.
Not sure that you can do anything about it. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay. Well, I will. There's going to be a team and consultants. Can you hear me?
We kind of lost you for a little while. You want to maybe try turning your video off and see if that helps with connection or anything?
Let's try that. That sounds good. Can you hear me now?
So far, so good.
Okay. So really part of this process is navigating some of the differences between community engagement and communication. I will be leading a team of staff and our consultants and also councilperson Savage, which is really exciting, to really help provide a community engagement and communications plan. And then also really in those things, really listening to folks and having that two-way conversation, really, so it's providing information. This policy and this process, really trying to define the ways, but really making sure that we're intentional about the differences. Next slide, please. So these are a draft of our guiding principles that we put together for the department.
Ashley, I'm sorry, we lost
under
you again.
inclusive, this could mean sharing information in a variety. What's going on? I apologize for the technical difficulties here. Not really sure what's going on. Can you hear me now?
We can now. It kind of just is intermittent. It comes and goes a little bit.
Okay, well, I apologize. This is a draft of our.
Yeah, we lost you again. Maybe we could go back to Ben and then we could circle back, or actually Aaron's here now.
Sure, I can try to round these out here, and then so these are the guiding principles that we'll be basing community engagement on, especially with regard to Ashley's engagement with the community. So we believe that community engagement should be and is genuine, equitable, inclusive, innovative, intentional, informed and transparent, iterative and always evolving, and user-friendly. And so we'll adhere to those principles. And then just to summarize again, the community engagement philosophy that we're building on here is to build trust within our community so residents feel like they can engage, so residents have an ongoing voice in issues that matter to them, and building those long-term relationships, not just on a project-by-project basis as we've tended to need to do in the past, but looking forward to build and move forward out of this project into the long term to be able to provide this type of relationship. Community engagement is a means for all residents to voice their thoughts, concerns, and ideas. And we want to bring a commitment to that. And then just to point out that this project will have targeted phases of engagement through our consultants as well, but the community engagement specialist will maintain a presence in the community and as a resource outside of those phases and on a continuous basis. So this brings us to our request today, which is to approve the professional services agreement with our selected consultant, Meta Urban Design, to work with and guide us on this complex and important project. So just to orient you to what's contained in the contract document, there is the professional services agreement itself, along with several exhibits. Exhibit A is the scope of work that we've been referencing. Exhibit B addresses compensation. Exhibit C is the request for proposal that we put together for this project. And then Exhibit D is the original proposal from Meta Urban Design team. The table here shows the overall amount of funding allocated to this project, half of which was already approved in the FY22 budget, and the other half of which will be requested in the upcoming FY23 budget. And finally, our recommended motion reads as follows. We recommend that Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement with Meta Urban Design for the city's comprehensive code reform project for the total amount of up to $850,000 to be equally distributed between 2 fiscal year budget cycles, $425,000 in fiscal year 2022, and the balance of $425,000 in fiscal year 2023. And that's all we have for you today. And
okay, well, thank you, Ben and Ashley. I appreciate the presentation. I had the opportunity to serve on the selection team for the consultant selection, and I'll attest to what Ben was saying, that there were a number of qualified proposals, a really difficult decision, and I think a team that is really exciting and will bring some real innovative approaches to what we're looking to do. Amber, do you have a question or comment or motion?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the presentation. I fully believe that land use code reform is going to be critical in getting more housing on the ground. There's, as I think that the mayor had said, we need to be intentional and systematic. It's not magical, because there is no magic way to get this done. We do need to invest in moving forward on the code reform. So I'm glad we're here. I wish we could make it happen faster than I think is reasonable. Yeah, because we need to get houses on the ground as fast and housing on the ground as fast as possible. And having, chatted with some developers over the years, I know that this couldn't be done fast enough for them. And we've got to make it as easy and as possible to get people in homes. So I am saying all that. I don't have any questions, but I appreciate all the work on this, and I am happy to make the recommended motion and excited to make the recommended motion.
Thanks, Amber. That motion is in order. I appreciate it. Gwen.
Thanks. Thanks for the great presentation. I'm excited about this project, and I'm thrilled that we are really having a focus on community engagement. I think that's wonderful to really have a quality project in the long run. I am very much in support of this, and I just wanted to paint a little context, I guess, around it, because being on city council, of course, we're always talking about affordable housing. It's a huge issue these days. And sometimes there's this call for, if we just get rid of regulation or streamline it, we're going to solve this problem. And I just wanted to, first of all, paint a little context. This affordable housing issue has been decades in the making, and it was a huge game changer with the 2008 financial collapse. and the ensuing recession that really slowed down building at a time when, frankly, we needed to be increasing building. So there were a lot of strong economic forces there. And then the pandemic, as we've seen, has just escalated everything, not only with a lot of people moving to Montana and to Missoula specifically, so demand has gone up exponentially, but labor has become a huge issue. It was before, and it's a bigger issue now, getting workers to build these, getting contractors to build, and then distribution for materials, and material prices have gone up. And then we have a finite amount of land in our island called Missoula that is also has a lot of floodplain within it that we cannot build on. So just a lot of factors are coming to fruition at the same time, causing this incredible problem. So it's complicated. And then we look at what we can do. I love our housing policy. I think it's a great, great policy. There are a lot of different components. And my takeaway over time has been there are a lot of different things that make up the equation for us to impact and alleviate housing issues in Missoula. Not a single one of them is a silver bullet. There is no one answer out there, but code reform is a significant part of that. And I'm really happy that we've been able to get to a point where we can kick this off. We have a great growth policy. There are a lot of things that have to go into creating the foundation to get to a code reform project like this in local government. And that foundation has been created along with our, based on our growth policy and all of those laterals. So I'm glad that we're at this point. And in general, it's a lot to keep the trains running on time. And something like this is above and beyond. So it takes a heavy lift in local government to get a project like this done. So I'm really happy that we are doing this, that we're kicking it off, that we have a strong engagement connection with it. And frankly, I've gotten to interact with the consultants, and they're really smart and really good. So this is what we do in government. We do what we can in areas where we can. And this is in that vein, I think. So I'm happy to support it.
Thanks, Gwen. Yuta?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to support this. I think there's been many years of conversations about getting this done and how it's going to set us up for the right kind of development. Yes, building faster is important, but I think building and growing intentionally is really important. I'm glad to see I commend you on the selection team. From what I have looked, all of them bring unique perspectives and areas of expertise, and all of them, I think, put a lot of emphasis on community engagement and equity and diversity, and those are important goals for us to meet. And yeah, I think that it's much needed. I'm glad to see it where it is. And I'm glad that as a community, we're going to have a chance to decide together how we want to see our city grow and what we're going to leave for the next generations. And I think the intentionality of how we grow is really important. And I'm glad that this will allow an opportunity for us to really look into that. So fully supportive.
Thank you. Sandra and then Daniel.
Thanks. That was a great presentation. Thank you for that. I'm still a little concerned with the cost of this and some of the things that were in the scope of work and with that. So I'm not fully on board with it yet. I do need to do a little bit more reading on this and do some thinking over the weekend on it. And I do think that it would be important to have this on the committee reports for the public to hear on Monday as well. So for now, I'm not going to be in supportive of this, but I likely might change my mind over the weekend after I do some more thinking on it. But today, I'm not going to be in supportive of it.
Thanks, Daniel, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this. I think it'll be a really good idea to help us with our affordable housing crisis in Missoula. I'm currently living in what was a single family home, but because of zoning was allowed to be changed into a threeplex. And in many parts of Missoula, that's not currently legal. So I think this is going to be really important for building our housing supply. And allowing more re-legalizing housing that's been illegal for some time. So I think this is going to be great for Missoula's housing crisis to help solve it.
Thanks. Jennifer?
I just also wanted to echo my support and say how much I appreciate the community engagement aspect of this work. When I was campaigning last year, that was one thing that I was really hopeful we would be able to bring to some of the processes in city government, is to help bring people to the table who traditionally don't have a voice in these kind of matters. And so I'm really grateful to see that in this proposal, and I'm happy to serve in that capacity.
Great, thanks, Jennifer, and thanks for volunteering to do that. One thing that the consultant said during one of the meetings that I've had with them was something that Daniel's comment just reminded me of, where they said, you know, if your most beloved neighborhood burned down, would you be able to replace it under your current zoning? And the answer is no in most cases, where we, you know, our neighborhoods that we love, University District, Northside, Westside, our older historic neighborhoods, the Lower Rattlesnake, the Slant Streets, and I'm not saying this to exclude any neighborhoods. There's a ton of great neighborhoods in Missoula, but some of the older neighborhoods that we're attempting to now emulate in new development through walkability and mix of uses, and a pleasant urban form, would not be permitted under our code. And so I think there's an opportunity to return to a lot of those traditional values that are also markers of cities of the future in terms of walkability and livability and resilience. I also really appreciate the mayor's comments around how and to I guess to state it another way, this feels like one of the rare occasions where we in Missoula may actually be able to have our cake and eat it too, with improving our regulations, from streamlining them, making them simpler, making them easier to use, and in improving the user experience. So we can. My hope is that we can truly make it easier to develop and cheaper to develop, and also maintain quality standards. I think that that's a large part of why this contract is expensive, is because it's taking basically titles 15 through 20 and maybe a little bit of title 12 and assessing them all in a comprehensive manner, and pulling them into a unified development code. So looking at subdivision regulations as a and looking at those side by side with zoning, so we can hopefully do away with referencing several different code bases, and also establish a hierarchy of what code takes precedence when. So when stormwater regulations conflict with another regulation, a utility regulation, or a public street requirement in Title 12, what takes precedence, and establishing a hierarchy and a decision-making framework within those. So I think this is an extremely exciting opportunity. I do want to speak briefly to Amber's comment on the timeline, and recognize that we have some major urgency around housing and around code reform. And also, this is a really accelerated process, and I think those can both be true, and that's okay. We're going to this process needs to move at the speed of public trust, and we need to have buy-in, and we need to have engagement, and that takes time, and we need to get it right. This is a once in a generation opportunity in terms of the funding level and the scope of the project. And so I think that the process that's been outlined, and bringing Ashley on as our community engagement specialist, and building that community buy-in in this process is going to be extremely important. So this time is going to fly by. It's going to be a tool in the toolbox, and it's going to yield important work. So I'm starting to ramble, so I'll stop. And next have John Contos.
Yes. Yeah, great presentation. Appreciate it. Sounds great. I heard a lot about public involvement, public comments, getting them involved. How does that happen?
Ashley or Ben, do you want to take that?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think, assuming you can hear me this time, I tried to move. There's a lot of different ways that can happen. Obviously, doing everything online, as I'm demonstrating this morning, is not the most reliable way of doing it. So getting out and going into the community, having individual conversations, having meetings in different neighborhoods that are outside 1 or 2 open houses, building relationships over time, and then we'll have those very targeted phases through the consultant that they will have prepared meetings and materials and scenario modeling and things like that. But before, during, and after those phases, I will be in the community answering questions, providing information, giving a sense of when folks are able to engage, and trying to get as much involvement as possible. So it's a little bit different in that it will be ongoing and hopefully build on itself and iterate over time. But a lot of it is really meeting people where they're at, and not just asking them to provide input on this specific project, but on an ongoing basis as well. And as Jordan said, that has a lot to do with building trust. And, we haven't been in the community as much in the last couple of years due to COVID. And so we have to start somewhere, and we're starting here. And I think it can only get better over time.
It sounds great. It still sounds a little vague. I'm wondering if there's some way, I don't know, group of people in the park with a picnic and throwing out your suggestions and things, but walking around one-on-one, that really doesn't sound like getting public attention.
I can follow up on that too. I think another way to look at it, is that the most basic way that people can be involved in these types of projects, is through the public meeting, public hearing processes, where you have that it's required by state law, and that the community is provided an allotted amount of time to participate in a process. And so that would be commenting at one of these the meetings we'll be having that there will be a few different approval processes through this project, and that's kind of the most basic guaranteed way that public participation has happened in the past. Over time, it's become clear that that's not enough. A lot of the time, that's kind of the bare minimum. And so a lot of these, planning processes will also include outreach events that could be anything from a large workshop like at the Wilma to smaller kind of more targeted, more neighborhood type events, tabling at a farmer's market or setting up at a neighborhood park or engaging people in surveys or online, using other online tools like that. And so that's kind of what I would think of as what's become the status quo of engagement for these types of processes, where there is, especially it's something that when you bring a consultant in on a project like this, the expectation is that they will have tools that they bring with them for how to further draw in the community and reach the community and seek out that comment. And those are the typical kind of ways of doing that. For this project, we again wanted to go beyond that, and status quo is it covers a lot. There's some very good status quo type of engagement, but and we anticipate a lot of those types of outreach events with this project as well, and that'll be further hammered out when we put together the public participation plan at the onset of this project. But even going beyond that is and there's also the in Missoula, the neighborhood council system, which is another established means of bringing in public engagement. And then recently, Ashley's position has been added to the department, where we want to make an effort beyond kind of these discrete events that are scheduled and people may not be able to make that time, or they're not available, or they have something come up, and that's where Ashley is able to even go above and beyond those and do follow up with people we might have missed, or provide other avenues to communicate and engage.
I see. Thanks.
Thanks. And if council members have ideas on how to engage with, whether it's with a certain group or a community event or something, what's the best way to elevate those ideas? Should we send those to you, Ashley?
Yes, for sure. And I think also, as we meet with these groups and these individuals, asking them the best way they want to be engaged. It's not totally up to me or anybody to determine that for them. It would be in conversation and in relationship, seeing how they would like to be engaged. And then I will also note part of this project will involve, there's community liaisons that will be a part of this, that will be hired through the consultant to go out and help become ambassadors of this project in their own communities and neighborhoods, to help build awareness around how this works. But there's also a lot of education that needs to be done throughout the community, and just information providing about how to engage, how to get involved, that this meeting is happening at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday, and that you can come learn about this project right now. There's a lot of different things that I think need to be, lay a foundation around how to even engage with the processes that we currently have, and then building them out from there as we talk to the community and inform them, and get their feedback on how they would like to be engaged as well. So we're definitely at a starting point, and hope to get more information and get more specific as we go. And that will be a big piece of the first few months, is building that engagement plan.
Thank you. Sandra?
Thanks. And I'm sorry if you touched on this, but how come we're not doing this internally and hiring an outside party to do the consulting on this? Is it because it's just too big of a job for our staff to do, or can you just kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I can talk about that, or there's a few reasons. Staff capacity is a big one. I think that this is a project that is it's big, and if it was all handled by staff, it would draw resources away from the things that we're already doing, and in other areas. This part of the goal of this is to modernize our code and bring it up to best practices, and that's something that we look for guidance from these types of groups in doing. And not to say that there aren't good ideas amongst those of us here, but these are people who have done a lot of this in a lot of places. They bring a lot with them, and I'll maybe pass it on to Erin as well, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you. Erin Pahan, CPDI. I would just add to what Ben shared, is that we oftentimes are not always the best at thinking about how to innovate a code that we have been implementing for over a decade now. And so, as Ben mentioned, that there there are innovative practices and code reform efforts now in implementation that are happening across the Rocky Mountain West that we can learn from. And this particular firm brought a wealth of experience in those communities, helping them shift their code to that place of meeting a variety of goals. And so that is one of the pieces that I think is exciting to us. We also have to acknowledge that we are in an interesting era of recruitment and retention as well. And so I think even if it was the right idea to do this internally, which I don't think it is, I think bringing in that outside expertise is a really compelling reason to work with a consultant. I think we have vacancies we can't fill today on our team to do our day-to-day work. And so that is a reality as well.
Thanks for that. Mayor, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and Ben and Aaron did a nice job of covering it, but in really any of our enterprises, when we can take advantage of fresh eyes and fresh ideas, as much as we like to think that Missoula is unique, we share a lot in common with other communities, and being in touch with folks who have spent time in those communities and can, again, my inelegant term of art is steal ideas. We ought to steal those ideas. And that happens it happens, we bring in third parties for training. We bring in third parties to consult on areas that we're moving too quickly, trying to do our daily work. This just gets pushed off 10 years, and I think the product is probably less than what it could be without the help of consultants. At the same time, staff working very closely with consultants, right? So we have that relationship. This is a document that the city of Missoula will own and implement, and making sure that we have staff dedicated to this process, which we do, is extremely important. And then the other piece of business here is we are just swamped. And the fact of the matter is that we're not going to be able to hire as quickly as we'd like, most likely, to take care of the more than 20 subdivisions that are going to come before this body in relatively short order. So there's a tremendous capacity issue here. So here I think we get the best of both worlds, and frankly, given the level of expertise that we get, and the fact that this is somebody's job, is extremely important. Having somebody who is focused on this and isn't going to get torn away to deal with emergency subdivision or whatever the crisis du jour is extraordinarily important. And I also wanted to touch briefly on the public engagement. We've gotten so much better at our community engagement, and I think we're getting better all the time. And I think if we look at the examples of even the long-range transportation plan, which had a lot of public participation during COVID, when folks were still getting adjusted to Zooming and all of those things, outdoor meetings, all of that. We've learned lessons from that. If you look at our Marshall Mountain planning process, you'll see that we have hundreds of people engaged in that process, because we've been intentional about that engagement. I will tell you, there was a day when we did code reform by locking a planner in the basement for 9 months, and that planner would emerge, take blows to the head and shoulders and chest, and then go back into the hole while council debated a document that was created in a vacuum, and left everyone absolutely dissatisfied. We're sort of doing the opposite here. Title 20 was an okay step in that direction. We had lots of engagement there, but I suspect we'll have more engagement here than we've had in a long time on a lot of issues.
Thanks. Sandra?
Okay, you guys convinced me. I'll be in supportive of it today.
Great. Thank you. Well, we're out of time. I want to thank Ben and Lavelle and Walter and Aaron and the team at CPDI for As Ben mentioned, one thing that all the consultants said in the selection process was that this was a really thoughtful RFP, and that the city staff had put a lot of thought into the process, and several of them applied, knowing that Missoula is going to be a really interesting community to work in. And so I want to thank everyone who put the RFP together. And I want to thank Ashley for all of her thoughtful work on engagement since she's come on board several weeks ago. And I think the future is bright in this process. So lastly, I guess, question, when can LUP or when can council expect sort of a kickoff meeting to kind of meet the consultants and understand or really get our toes wet?
I think we would be looking at from once we're up and running for probably a month or month and a half to get things hammered out on the project management plan and putting some of these project related plans together. And so looking at around June, kind of early summer. That's what I would anticipate.
Great. All right. Well, thanks for a great discussion. Thanks for bringing this forward. We're out of time. And just again, for the record, there's no public here to comment, so we won't take public comment. So we can have a roll call vote.
Becerra,
Yes.
Carlino,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Asika,
Yes.
West.
Yes.
All right, all yeses.
Great. So the motion passes, and there was mention of committee reports. Does anyone have desire to have this on committee reports, or it is a big, okay, I don't see any expressions of that, so we'll have this on consent agenda then. Thanks, everyone. We will be adjourned.